Aquarius workshop, letting go of substitute parents. I start with a quote from Pathwork Lecture 156 with the title Questions and Answers, and the quote is as follows. The more childishly you hang on to a parent substitute, making him or her responsible, wanting to be taken care of, and refusing the consequences of your own actions and decisions, the more you want to have your cake and eat it too, the less you are able to utilize the great freedom. End of quote from Pathwork Lecture 156. As long as we are mentally and emotionally immature and still a child within, we project a substitute parent onto all men and women and want to receive more love than we are willing to give. Unconsciously, we continue to demand exclusive love, care, and protection from everyone out of fear of destruction, trapped in this vicious cycle of emotional dependency. The inner child refuses to take responsibility for life and thinks it can fool life. The inner child only wants to receive, wants a privileged position, doesn't want to take risks, doesn't want to expose itself, and is therefore emotionally dependent and a slave to its misconceptions. As a result of this negative attitude, it paralyzes and weakens itself and has a strong urge to control and dominate the outside world. The inner child believes it is rebelling against an authority figure who represents a substitute parent. In reality, the inner child rebels against its lack of healthy self-love, against the merciless severity of the superimposed conscience, against its disparaging view of itself, against its rejecting and self-punishing attitude, and as a consolation, it chooses unhealthy self-love and self-indulgence. When we know what we want from others, when we are most dependent, resentful, afraid, weak, and unable to be authentic and autonomous, then we find a chain that binds us. We can only break this chain when we stop demanding from others the love, care, and validation that we must give to the inner child so it can mature. When we find a resistance to taking full responsibility for our immature aspects, then we find a breaking point in the vicious cycle of emotional dependency, and we begin to love ourselves in a healthy way. For to the extent we take responsibility for this developmental process by facing ourselves, we truly love ourselves and are able to reconnect with our true self, which is in love and truth. Then we have the ability to set others free because we demand nothing of them, and only then will we experience true freedom. In this workshop we will explore, with a loving curiosity, 3 themes of the Pathwork Lectures regarding letting go of substitute parents. The first theme, wanting to remain a child. Trapped in unreality, we experience the world as hostile and cruel. We want to remain a child and not take responsibility for ourselves. We project substitute parents onto everyone we meet in this life, demanding from them the love and recognition we missed in childhood, and refuse to give this to ourselves. With this immature attitude, we damage our integrity by betraying the best within ourselves. The exercise below invites us to objectively observe our relationship with both parents, allowing us to free ourselves from this destructive survival strategy of self-rejection and choose the gentle power of self-acceptance and self-respect. The next quote stems from Pathwork Lecture 115. Most of you yet need to realize to what a strong degree you carry this original relationship to both your parents and to all your current life situations. Once you perceive this in all its significance, you will truly be liberated. But it requires a great deal of work, patience, perseverance, courage, and humility to follow through and arrive at this point. The best way to experience the truth of these words is to take any of your findings, to consider your feelings as a child towards your parents, and then to see how your responses still react according to the same feelings you once harbored towards your parents, for each parent in a different way. End of quote from Pathwork Lecture 115. The second theme, letting go of false needs. The inability to let go of false needs is the primary reason we feel inferior. Every false need is addictive. The more we think we need that particular false need, the more vigorously we pursue it and become even more alienated from ourselves. And the more we become accustomed to it, the more we believe we need it to survive. When we find the simple point of letting go of false need in a relaxed and trusting way, we are no longer enslaved to them. This attitude is an important step on the path to inner freedom, strength, self-confidence and self-respect. The next quote stems from Pathwork Lecture 192. A child needs to be taken care of. It needs to be solely a recipient in care, nursing, good feelings, attention, appreciation of its own uniqueness. If these needs are not fulfilled, the child must suffer. If this suffering is dealt with on the conscious level, the personality does not remain crippled, as many would want to believe. What creates a crippled state is the belief that this pain can only be eliminated when the personality is finally given all that was lacking, even years later. Now this can never be, of course, for even if it were possible for an adult to finally obtain substitute parents who are ideal and perfect according to the notions of the deprived child, to an adult all this giving from outside could never bring fulfillment. End of quote from Pathwork Lecture 192. The third and last theme, wanting to be emotionally mature. An emotionally mature person is relaxed both internally and externally because they trust themselves and life. They show loving attention to themselves and their surroundings because they love themselves, others, and life itself. They experience life as an eternal source of ever new experiences of joy, pleasure, delight, and self-expression. Constructively utilizing creative power is both challenging and fascinating. They love the truth, have integrity, and accept responsibility for themselves, making them completely free and independent. The last quote stems from Pathwork Lecture 177. To the degree you assume the apparent hardship at first of adulthood with all its ramifications, something in you will ease up and feel less and less threatened. Instead, you will become open to pleasure in its deepest and fullest meaning. You can meditate about this equation, about the connection between emotional maturity with all its meanings on the one hand, and the realization of personal pleasure on the other. This is really very logical. You know that you can only truly love when you are self-responsible, not when you cling to someone else, when you are dependent on someone else. Such dependency may have the superficial appearance of love, but you have already experienced in your work on this path that nothing could be further from the truth. In fact, dependency stems from fear and creates greater fear, therefore inevitably resentment and hate. You try very hard to conceal these feelings because it is threatening to experience hate for the person one needs and depends on. Love is possible only when you are free, when you are a self unto yourself without depending on another. And pleasure is possible only when you love. End of quote from Pathwork Lecture 177. I wish you peace and all the best. Thank you.